What is going on, guys? My name's Will, and if you're new to the channel, I'm a filmmaker, photographer, entrepreneur from St. Louis, Missouri. With every video I make, I aim to inspire, motivate, and push you to reach your fullest potential. Hopefully you feel a little bit inspired and choose to stick around for a while. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button for more awesome videos just like this one here. Today we are here with my good friend, business partner, and entrepreneurship genius, Rob TD. So, Rob, seen good movies lately? So do you follow Key and Peele at all? Do you know Key and Peele?
No, I don't.
So Key and Peele, the comedians, they used to have this, like, they did skits on Comedy Central, and then, so, it's like Keegan something, and then Jordan Peele. Michael Keegan, and then Jordan Peele, right? Okay, well, the two guys, right? They're comedians. So Jordan Peele goes and is like, I want to direct movies, right? So he did Get Out. He's a director of Get Out. Do you ever see that? The horror film that played on like different stereotypes.
Oh, I don't watch
and it was
horror films.
But it was a horror film directed by a comedian. So it was like, it was not necessarily horror, but more of like a comedic thriller.
Kind of like Scary Movie?
But not.
Okay.
Just beautifully done professionally, right?
Interesting.
So he came out with another movie called Us, right? And
Us?
he came out with this other movie called Us, right? And after watching so many documentaries afterwards and like night show clips and stuff like that where he's talking about the stereotypes that he played on in these movies, he went and made another one, and it's the same kind of concept of a horror film directed by a comedian that's like one of the most like in society right now. It's being talked about a lot because it has so many like social stereotypes that it's playing on so beautifully, and there's so many things hidden in it that you go and watch it 3 or 4 or 5 times and you see more and more and more and more and more every
that's
time.
Really interesting. But I think most content that you can consume, you can find a lot that you can consume that the same way, right?
Exactly.
Like I used to watch House on repeat, and before that it was How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
You know, I would watch on repeat just like season after season, then like you get done, you start it again because it's just like what you're falling asleep to.
Absolutely.
And I'm doing that with Game of Thrones right now, and I'm like really starting to get, because now it's like my second and a half, third solid watch through. I'm starting to like really see like these intricate movements that the production crew, the director are all doing to kind of set up the story in more complex ways that like I'm even now aware of it. Like I think it was like in season 5, one of the guys makes a reference to like just how people die all over the place, and however many places, and like people die here, they die there, they die doing this, they die doing that, they die squatting over their chamber pots, you know. And like 3 like episodes later, one of the main guys kills someone on a chamber pot. And so it's just like, it's really interesting to look at, you know, a developing piece of art in kind of that reflective way.
You know, we could even relate that into a lot of the things that we see on art in social media, right? So like, you know, hinting at things on a YouTube channel or on social media, and then you see it play out later. And, you know, not everybody might notice it, but you create that, and then that becomes very engaging to an audience at the end of the day.
Well, and I think we even know things for our Triangle company that we've kind of like set in play for like a long-term kind of reveal, right? And I think stuff like that is just, it's weird because like it's one thing that like the creators are doing to kind of have that fun meta relationship with their audience, as well as like it does like create like a quasi extra layer of engagement of like the true fans that like you know, liked dubstep before it was cool.
Yeah. And, you know, I see it in, like, so this one channel that I follow called Wolves, right, on YouTube. They hinted something in a video almost 2 years ago, and then they brought it back up in a video 2 years later, and it's like, hey, you remember this? If you remember this, comment down below. Like, you're the real people, you know? And they didn't explain it at all whatsoever, but they told you where to go and find it. And so then that brings you back, and you go and search for it 2 years earlier.
My gosh.
And then you can go and watch that video like, oh my, this is what he's talking about.
Well, and I think that kind of consumption of media, that's really interesting, because what people can do is really see like kind of the macro development of a brand.
Yeah.
Right? Like Gary Vee starts, does all his crap, he talks his talk, but then seeing it play out for 10 years of like, oh crap, he's walking the walk, like you really get an extra layer of intimacy with the brand.
Yeah, and that's really, really cool. And if you really are, I would go into like consuming Gary Vee's content, consuming Gary Vee, consuming, Adam Horwitz with the Wolves, consuming Casey Neistat, consuming Peter McKinnon. I feel like I know these people.
Scene Anners growing up?
I did.
Dude, Scene Anners was the
Yeah, but you feel like you know those people.
Yeah,
It's like I feel like I could go and sit down at lunch with Casey Neistat and I'd know everything about his life. Like I feel like we've been friends for a long time. I feel like I've been friends with Adam Horwitz for a long time.
I wonder if that translates into like really weird interactions between content creator and audience. Like
it probably does.
Yeah, if like once you reach a certain point, there's got to be a moment of like, hey, like don't act like you know me.
Yeah.
Like
that's kind of interesting that you say that.
Well, or at the very least it forces the content creator into a certain mindset of where they always have to be prepared for that kind of engagement.
Yeah. But again, that's very engaging content, because I feel like I know them. I feel like I can trust them with what they say, and then they can go and say something like, oh, buy my product. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
If Casey Neistat said anything about cameras, you're gonna believe him.
Oh,
right?
Of course.
Yeah, like and
I feel like I know him.
And I think like part of that is just like you've spent years with them, you've consumed X amount of content with them, and it's crazy like what brands really turn into when you play it out.
Absolutely. And that's, kind of what I'm getting to with Will Higley is I want to create that sort of relationship with my fans where I am providing that value over and over again and tenfold, where I want them to feel like they know me,
Yeah.
I want that relationship.
Well, the only way to do that is with just like a mountain of content. And that's
Absolutely.
like crazy imposing and hard to do, just like in and of itself.
Well, yeah, I know. And we talked a little bit about I'm going to go every day on YouTube again. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to start. I'm going to start in about a couple months here, but I'm starting to create videos now to kind of push forth that mountain of content that I'm going to be putting out later.
I'm really interested to see how this plays out, because it's really going to set up the case study of whether or not Fort Knox actually works as a tactic.
Yeah.
Right? So like when you're rolling it out every day, are you getting authentic engagement? Mm-hmm. Right? Or does it kind of feel weird? Right?
Yeah.
So like that's going to be like the proof of the pudding.
And there's so like I can go through so many examples here. Casey Neistat, he really got his name in he kind of pioneered the YouTube day vlog, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that he did that is he got on a video and said, hey, I'm going to create a video every day for 365 days, right?
Gosh.
Then he did it for 4 years.
That's crazy.
I
didn't know that.
That's how he blew up.
That's how he started, because I never was an active follower of Casey. Like I always saw him like interact with like Gary Vee, and even before I was into Gary Vee, like
he's in those circles.
My dad and brother like were really into him, and it's like, oh, like that's neat. Like I used to AV, like that's cool. But like people will have this entire ecosystem of seeing that, and like that's really cool. Like to start that way, I guess that really like just forces it into actualization.
Of course, and you do that. Other examples, you think about Gary Vee, right? He had a podcast, and he did it every Friday, every week for 18 months. Is that right?
No, I'm not exactly sure on like the actual format that he did, but I know that he had both the Ask Gary Vee show and the Daily V. Right?
Okay.
And the Daily V is obviously, I think, week daily.
Yeah.
But where he really created his platform and brand recognition was through Wine Library TV, which is what he built. Like Wine Library family discount liquors off of, right? And then grew that into like a $60 million business.
Yeah.
Through like content creation. So it's like a lot of the things I interact with a lot of people when we talk about content creation, content marketing, video production, is I don't think there's been enough scenarios yet where people just believe it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you build a brand? Oh, it's through creating content constantly every day for a decade.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you develop a brand for yourself. And because it's like, okay, do this for a decade and I'll check in later.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, it sounds suspicious, but pointing to like Gary, who like built a brand that wasn't even for himself, you know, that's like, I think he ended with 1,000 episodes on Wine Library TV.
Yeah.
That's like nuts.
You know, and that can also be, you know, played back into anything. You know, just thinking about YouTubers, you know, we were at that YouTube meeting a couple weeks back.
That's right, Adventure.
And we talked about, you know, from my experience, the quality over quantity on YouTube, and then also the 60% rule, you know?
Oh, 60% rule is really interesting.
And that's kind of what I learned from studying under a few very successful YouTube creators out there today, is if you are consistently putting up content, and consistency is, you know, talking to a lot of different YouTubers, consistency is the biggest hurdle with
I think so too.
YouTube creators.
Yeah.
You know? Everybody wants to be a
creating
YouTube creator.
habits by nature is just really, really difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know? And then doing that daily content, you know, some things that help you in that is you have the quantity over quality, you know? And I've seen countless channels grow in that sense with quantity over quality and having that 60% rule.
Yeah.
But then there's also, you look at a channel like Peter McKinnon, right? And I don't know if you've dove into any of his videos.
You've shown me a couple of videos, but I haven't jumped into the ecosystem by myself yet.
So he's doing everyday weekday now, and he didn't say anything about it. He just kind of started doing it, right? But really how he blew up is he made one video called like 6 camera hacks in 60 seconds or something like that. And all the way to the top, dude. You know? And his videos are quantity, and they also have quality.
Yeah, and I think like I'd even say the same for like Gary Vee and other like super high level brands where it is like both, right? But something that is like a really neat like reflective experience piece is to jump back into the original archive of content and look at episode 1.
Yeah.
Dude, and episode 1 versus the Instagram video you're watching today of your favorite brand, it's mind-blowing to see that evolution, right?
And even for me to say, you know, I have all my old hard drives from when I was doing daily on YouTube. My first day was trash, whereas the 40th day going every day was insane.
Awesome.
It was awesome.
And
it was so cool, you know?
And that's, I think, just the nature of creating content, right? It's like you can't limit yourself to being fancy when you're not fancy yet.
Yeah, so that kind of ties into the 60% rule, and especially when you're starting out in the beginning, using that 60% as kind of like a base marker until you move forward and can go to 70% and 80% and 90%, you know. Yeah, I did count that in the right order.
Good job.
Until you can do that quantity and quality at the same time.
Oh, 100%. And I think at the end of the day, like, you're not going to gain the ability to like increase the production quality of your content unless you're making content and seeing the data that comes back from it. And the only way to get that data is to release content, right?
Absolutely.
So like this is like a ladder that you're going to be able to build, but the only way to like actually build the ladder is by putting the content out and like being okay with crap quality until it's not.
Exactly. And that's, you know, again, that's where the 60% rule really comes into play right there. And I thought that was interesting that at the YouTube meetup at Venture the other week, I brought up the 60% rule and nobody had ever heard of it before.
Which is really, really weird because you'd think that people who are literally making content every day, like that's something that they're basing their lives around. But it seems that they're just going through the extra like crazy nitpicky time of creating content versus which extends any piece of content like it's going to take days to put out versus hours.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I was when I started. Was I don't want to do a video. I don't like the color of my teeth. I don't like how my hair looks today. I don't like what I'm talking about. I'm not doing anything cool. I'm not going to pull out the camera. It's all the way in my bag, and I'm
On
lazy.
today's podcast, we're talking about Will's insecurities.
Yeah, basically. All of that, the nitty-gritty, that all disappeared when the 60% rule came into play.
Yeah, because you either perform or you lose.
Absolutely. That's a really, that is a harsh, savage way to put that, but that's exactly true.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we want to touch on right here?
I mean, I'm running out of time, so let's do hot take. What is the next social media platform that you're paying attention to?
So the next one I'm paying attention to, and you've kind of turned me on to this as well, is TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So there's like increasingly amounts of great content on TikTok, and we're seeing all sorts of advertisements for it, trying to bring people to that platform.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of platforms come in and out here in maybe the past year. You've seen a lot of ads for this platform or that platform, or Justin's called me and said like, dude, check out this new platform, and then I never hear anything about it again.
And I think that I'm just kind of looking at the same indicators that like past platforms have developed before they got big.
Absolutely.
Like DJ Khaled was the reason Snapchat became Snapchat, because he started like playing with it.
Absolutely.
And now that he just jumped in and did an actual like true blue endorsement of TikTok, I'm like, okay, this is about to become mainstream within the next 3 months.
Yeah. And then there's also the argument that all of these platforms, you have the what is the word that you keep saying? You have the
Omnichannel strategy.
Yeah, so
Right.
as many places as you can possibly be.
So find your audience, and wherever they is, make content for them.
But there's also the argument, and I heard this as well studying under Brendan Amato from the Wolves, was when a new platform comes out, you want to be the first one on there.
Oh,
because
yeah,
if you are the first one on there, no
first
matter
mover advantage is
where that
everything.
platform goes.
Yeah.
So right when TikTok came out, I should have been the first one on that platform. Just like, for example, Jory was one of the first people on that platform and grew to over 1,000 in a week, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think just because there's not enough supply right now that any demand on the platform, you can really, really climb that ladder really fast. And it's not too late for you to get on TikTok either.
Exactly.
But I'm willing to say that young brands need to take their time, learn it, become an expert, put out that content, but know that they're not going to, if they missed that first mover advantage, be diligent about it, create that content on that platform, but don't expect to be DJ Khaled on Snapchat.
Of course.
Right? But use a developing center like this to kind of get that brand exposure and brand growth for you, so that when the next thing comes around, you're then locked and loaded and ready to go.
And see, that's also the argument of I wasn't the first one on Instagram. Instagram was around way before I got on Instagram.
I think Instagram was around 10 years before I got on it.
Exactly, So it's not to say that you cannot grow on a platform that already has a ton of people on it.
Yeah.
It's to say that it might be easier on a new platform, especially if that takes off.
And at the end of the day, platforms are evolving every day. Right now, LinkedIn is super frothy on organic reach. And that's something that I'm getting us to the point where we can take advantage of that. But I know it's not going to happen every night, because infrastructure is built slowly. Rome wasn't built in a day. Right?
Exactly. Should we invite Cassie on the podcast?
I mean, at this point, she's called 8 times.
Hey, Cassie, you want to be on a podcast? Do you have anything to say to Rob?
Oh my god, hey Rob.
What's good, Cassie? How you doing?
Rob's a cutie too.
My goodness.
Oh,
Cassie,
man.
you've really motivated us here in this podcast.
I'm going to go and podcast to the world now.
Yeah, right? This podcast is going up everywhere. All right.
What's up, Cassie? How we doing?
All right.
We're gonna hang out. You get to just watch us do this.
Who cares about Will Higley, am I right?
Win some, lose some.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
His nose is okay.
So, where were we?